Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're in the Chief Petty Officer's exhibit on the main deck of Battleship New Jersey. Today is the 40th anniversary of the terrorist attack on the Marine Corps barracks in Beirut, Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War. October 23, 1983, USS New Jersey was part of a multinational peacekeeping force operating ashore and off the coast of, and in the airspace above, Lebanon. For tonight's video, we're going to let the crew of Battleship New Jersey tell the story of her involvement in the Lebanese Civil War in their own words. And tonight's video is in memorial of Chief Michael Wayne Gorczynski, an electrician who served on Battleship New Jersey and was tragically killed in the Barracks Bombing.
In addition to its 9 16-inch guns, New Jersey is outfitted with Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon surface-to-surface missiles, 4 Vulcan Phalanx close-in weapons systems, and 6 twin 5-inch 38 caliber gun mounts. Most impressive of her assets, however, is her people, a motivated and dedicated crew of over 1,500 men enthusiastic about serving on a battleship.
And went on station in Beirut, and then arrived there in September of 1983. At the time, we had quite a few Marines stationed there, and between the religious fractions, there was a lot of combat occurring. I can remember when we first showed up on station off the coast. We had received fire at the ship from land artillery batteries, but they didn't have the range to hit the ship. You know, you could see the splashes and explosions in the water, but we just moved on out a little bit.
There never was any kind of a feeling other than they were constantly, noticing, that there was fighting going on. There was a civil war going on in Lebanon, and our division officer every once in a while would have to go over there to help the Marines with certain things. Same thing with Chief Gorczynski. He would go and troubleshoot the electronic gear that they had.
Well, when we got to Beirut, it was basically in the August time frame of 1983. I believe the embassy had already been bombed when we got there. If you recall, there was an embassy bombing and a few people were killed in the embassy. And it was just before we got there.
Then we just remained on station for quite some time. There were some carriers in the area, and they were doing some land strikes and whatnot.
They cut circles in the water. That's all we did. We used to, and apparently what they started to do is, each day we went further and farther out. So, in the beginning they would see us probably 2-3 times a day. Then it was, 2 times a day, then once a day, then once every other day. So they never knew. I guess they were trying to keep them, whoever we wanted to keep on the toes. They didn't want us to know when we were leaving. And,
It was the evening of the 22nd. I was on watch up in CEC, Combat Engagement Center. I was a Tomahawk OIDT operator. I worked with the Tomahawk cruise missile systems. I was actually the planner of the route that the missile would actually fly to its target. So I guess it was about 2300, which is 11 p.m. We had a request from shore from one of the Marine units saying that they needed a fire control radar technician to repair one of their tanks. And Master Chief Gorczynski was in Combat Engagement Center at the time and volunteered to go ashore. So I guess we went to flight quarters about midnight or shortly thereafter. Master Chief went ashore, and about that time I was due to get off watch. I went to bed, and I guess it was about 6:30 the following morning. The general quarters alarm sounded. I jumped out of my rack and got up to CEC as soon as possible. And that's when we were informed that the barracks had been attacked. We didn't know the condition of Master Chief Gorginski, where he was, or anything. And that's when things really started going downhill.
The bombing of the barracks was a big surprise. They hadn't done anything like that before. And they didn't do it after that either, even though they probably tried. Yeah, there were several that volunteered. The R Division officer had been, he had come off the mid watch, and so he was out jogging on the flight deck, before, between 6 and 6:30, and it was 6:20 when the bomb went off, and it stopped him, and he heard it, and then he started seeing the smoke come up, so he immediately ran to his stateroom, changed into his work uniform, and then hightailed it to the bridge to talk to the skipper. And the skipper tasked him with getting some men together, get all the things that you need, and go over to the barracks and do whatever you can to help, and if you can, find Chief Gorginski. And so he went back to his division, talked to his men. His entire division wanted to go over to the barracks, and he picked 9 of them, and which meant the rest of them had to double up watches, and went over on the first helo. They also the ship had passed the word for other volunteers. Well, I know for a fact that at least 10 or more of my men went over to help out. And so there were several helos that flew over there full of guys, and for 4 or 5 days, all they did was move rock, rubble, and try to find people. Every once in a while, they would find someone who had survived, but most of the time, they would find body parts and people and things of that sort. I had a really, was a kind of a Man Mountain Dean kind of guy, second class petty officer, I think he was, that worked for me in M Division, and he went over, this big tough guy. After about the 3rd day of doing this, he just couldn't do it anymore. It was really getting to him. Some of the men ended up getting medevaced to I think it was Cigadella in Italy, because they just couldn't handle the what they had seen and smelled and heard and so forth. I still can see that petty officer in my mind's eye. It not only shook him, it shook me too, because you got to feel for a guy,
I was running on the flight deck behind turret 3. I remember coming around starboard side, crossing towards port. We were about 1.5 miles off the coast, and I remember hearing a huge explosion, and then a large gray mushroom style cloud coming up. Not a true like a nuclear mushroom, but I remember a long vertical slender cloud, and then it had a blast top on it. I remember looking at it and realizing something really bad had just happened, because I used to go in routinely. We would bring we had a bakery on board. We would fly in with the aviation crews that were going in. We would fly breads and donuts and baked goods. We were known for bringing in 20-pound loaves of bologna. I won't give you the Navy slang term for that, but we used to bring that in. Cans of peanut butter and jelly, coffee, things like that we'd bring in for the Italians, the French, the Brits. And so I got to know quite a few of them during that time period from my interactions.
So that bombing happened on a Sunday morning in October 23rd, and I happened to be on watch on the bridge that morning, and it was a very sleepy little watch, the 4 to 8 watch in the morning, or whatever, not much happening or anything. And I do recall even who I was on watch with, and we felt the explosion, didn't know what was happening. We didn't have the internet of today and the instant communication with phones and internet. And then we looked towards the beach to try to figure out what was happening, and we could see the black cloud from the explosion.
I was there. Yeah, in fact, I remember the announcement, that there was a bombing, and that Grenada had just happened. So I thought, well, more Grenada stuff. But I remember because the PA was right above my bunk, and I just woke up to them announcing that 23 or 20 something casualty. So it wasn't until it was Sunday, I went to Mass and asked one of my shipmates, well, what happened? And then he told me that they had bombed the barracks there that the Marines were staying at. So then the numbers just kept escalating. The numbers just kept escalating.
We ended up losing 241 people in that explosion. One of them was our shipmate, Senior Chief Gorchinsky. He was an ET. Chuck, listen, he says, stay close. He says, I'll show you. He says, you can literally crawl in that helmet if things start going down. And I remember him telling me that. And actually, he was an amazing guy. He gave me a lot of confidence being over there. I mean, we don't wear flak jackets and stuff like that, but we had hard, helmets and flak jackets. And
I went up. The captain called for volunteers to go in. Our division had 9 personnel that went in that initial wave with me. We had guys all over the ship that volunteered. It was carnage, unbelievable scale. It was probably one of the first terrorist acts, now that we look back at it, one of the first terrorist acts that of such a magnitude. I remember we started digging people out immediately. I had the ship's force group and Marines helping and just trying to find anybody that was still alive, injured.
We brought a lot of the wounded were flown out to the ship because we had doctors aboard the ship, and they tried to take care of most guys that they could.
And I told the XO, I said, XO, if there's anything I could do, I'd like to be able to help. And the XO said, sure, Chuck. Now, I was an ensign at the time. I might have been a Lieutenant JG, but I'm almost sure I was an ensign. That was it. That was all that was said. Later that evening, it was one of those little 1MC calls. Ensign diverted, captain's cabin. It's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? You get called to the captain's cabin, that's pretty bad. Walked into the captain's cabin, and the captain was there. Captain Milligan, along with XO, Captain McKenna, weapons officer, Commander Messina. I think the chaplain was there as well, and myself, and reporting his orders, sir. Asked me to sit down and told me that if my offer was still true, that we were asked to send a working party ashore to the building to help dig through the rubble and as part of the rescue operation. Told us, first thing he said is, you're safe in here. You can take off your helmets and your flak jackets. And we're looking through this building. He said, what are all these holes from? He said, it's just from over the years when I'm shooting at the building. Sort of wanted to keep that helmet and flak jacket on. But we did, and that had been the makeshift morgue. And our first job of going there was to properly take care of the Marines, the remains of our Marines. And there were the body bags. After they were dug out of the building, they were first put in an area where people from that area could see them to try to identify remains. And then body bags were transported by ambulance over to this morgue. And we loaded the remains into caskets and so that they could be flown back to the United States by C-5. That was just a pretty intense job. Not something I thought about when I signed my contract for enlistment or whatever, but something that I wanted to and needed to do to help. We finished that job around lunchtime, and they took us over to the building and explained what they wanted us to do is that as they would go through sections of the building, they would bulldoze sites, and they wanted us to continue to look for remains and and identification. If you found a body part, what's around it, wallets, dog tags, any identifying papers, put them into the bags with the remains to try to help with identification. But it was something that we needed to do. I think it was something that I needed to do. I needed to help at that time, knowing what had happened over there. It was a bad day. We knew that Chief Korchinski was over there. We didn't know for days that he had passed.
When we landed, I remember Admiral Milligan asked me to find out what happened to where Chief Korchinski was at the time. We did not know he had been lost at that point. He had stayed overnight. He was working on some radars there for one of the units, and he had missed the last flight out to the ship, so he had stayed overnight.
After things settled down, maybe 2 weeks later after the bombing, we finally had gotten word that Master Chief Korchinski was in the barracks at the time of the bombing and had died. His body was eventually identified in Germany, I believe, through dental records.
And the guys who was on board was telling me that they wanted a little revenge, basically, so.
And we would take a lot of the Marines that weren't wounded, that were in good shape. Were coming out to the ship on a rotating basis to eat with us, to get showers and whatnot, and try to just stress down a little bit, And then they would go back to shore, and some more Marines would come back out.
Was there any rotation between the Mardet on the ship and the shore?
No, I believe our Mardets stayed aboard, but we were just trying to help as much as possible, Then there was one particular night. After that, that's when things, like I said, started to heat up, and we had gotten a lot of naval gunfire support missions requested by the Marines, and we were doing a lot of 5-inch 38 missions, whatnot. And then one night we had gotten a message, intelligence message, that a terrorist attack was going to be planned against the New Jersey. That a commercial airliner had been loaded with explosives and had taken off someplace in Europe, and its mission was to locate the New Jersey and basically do a kamikaze attack on our ship. For a while there, we were getting intel information that the plane was here, and they were monitoring its progress, and at that time we went into it was at night when this was occurring. We turned all shipboard lights out above decks. We went into a zigzag pattern for hours and hours and hours, and finally we got word that the terrorist threat was no longer valid. But I got to tell you, I was scared, literally scared to death. And this was the real deal. Because at one time Captain Milligan told us, mandatory, everyone will don their dog tags. Every sailor on this board this ship will have their dog tags on. So that happened.
I remember vividly is when we finally got even.
We retaliated, I think it was 240 high explosive shells we launched in Syrian targets.
And then February is when we really got a big time fire mission. I think one particular day we fired 283 rounds out of 16-inch guns, and it was exciting for the crew.
Was that the first time you'd experienced the 16-inch guns?
Yes, it was, and I was amazed at the power, the intimidation of these big guns was tremendous.
Ship shaken, You know, it's like, holy cow, pipes vibrating. It's like, felt like you're going to shake yourself apart, you know.
I think that time we went into GQ, I think everybody was cheering. Yeah, we shot guns all day, 270-something rounds, if I'm not mistaken. After a while, they actually went into relaxed, GQ, where actually, semi-GQ, I don't know what they call it, but, we were able to go back to doing normal business, but they just kept firing all day. But it did get scary at the end of that day. They called away the harpoon.
When it was just the 16-inch guns going, when we were at full GQ, oftentimes we did get to go up and watch the guns fire. There were times when we were at general quarters, and of course, in the 5-inch gun mount, you couldn't see anything. And we were called to fire on several times too, and that was pretty exciting. It's funny thinking back now. We weren't really thinking about what we were shooting at as much as we were just going through the motions of making sure that we were loading the gun safely and getting them fired. Most impressive thing you could ever see. It's so magnificent you really can't put words to describe what it feels like when those guns go off.
They told us we were going to leave station and return home several times. We would get our hopes up and, hey, we're finally going home. Then a day later, no, you're not. You've been delayed. Remain on station. And I've learned over the years that at the time, the reason was for the delay was the Iowa was not ready to relieve the ship. And finally, I guess it was May of when we got relieved and returned home.
We were when we were told we could go home. We got escorted off. We were escorted off from our area where we were at, area of operation, and there was carriers out there, destroyers out there. They were just like escorting us, saying goodbye to us, and it was a great feeling. And it was like a sunset, like a cowboy riding his horse, leaving the sunset. And that's how it was with us. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people that have been in wars really talk real closely about that. I know you talk an awful lot about people from World War II, and guys said, I never knew Dad did that. In fact, the book, Flag of Our Fathers, they found out after Dad died that he was one of the guys that hung up that flag at Iwo Jima and everything, because they found stuff in his boxes in his closet, that type of thing.
I suffered from PTSD from it about 26 years later. It boiled out and came out, and it came out in a very strange way. It came out because I had a boss that was very unnerving, and something in what he was doing triggered me back to those events. When I was in counseling sessions at Bethesda at the time, I'm sitting across from this guy in one of the sessions one day, and the guy says, I know you. And I said, and I think I know you. And we started talking, and he was the operations officer for the Marine Corps at the barracks in Beirut. And both of us had shown up with PTSD 26 years later in 2011. And here we both are in the same room in Bethesda. Who would have ever guessed that would ever happen?
Every year in that anniversary, it sort of hits me. That 30 years was a tough one. Losing those lives and the way. I'm not going to go into graphic detail about the condition of the building because it was pretty graphic. That anyone who's ever experienced the horrors of war would never start one.
We typically associate the war with terror on military actions that take place after the September 11th, 2001 attacks. However, involvement in the Lebanese Civil War was New Jersey fighting terrorism. This represents an amazing change in the ship's mission and equipment from when she was built to fight fascism and imperialism, and even to her reactivation and modernization in the 80s to fight communism. All of these are peer rivals. And yet Battleship New Jersey was one of the first of a long list of American warships in the late 20th and 21st centuries that have participated in combat action against terrorism. In lieu of a question for you in tonight's video, I ask that you take a moment of silence and reflect on our brave men and women who serve overseas, protecting the rest of us from terrorist attacks. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to the museum and our channel. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum. Thanks for watching.